the things that you talked about with incels is that, and this was a part of the what was it? It was a New York Times hit piece.
Yeah.
You said one of the cures for this is enforced monogamy. People decided, and I had never heard that term before, quite honestly, and I was like, well, what the fuck does that mean? It's a psychological term, and what it means is enforced by culture, that it is a good value.
Monogamy, yeah, because
Right.
polygamous societies tend to become ultra-violent.
Yeah.
And that's been known in the anthropological literature for 100 years. And certainly leftist anthropologists were among those who discovered it. Like, the journalist knew perfectly well what I meant by enforced monogamy. She's not stupid.
You use it as if everybody would understand it because you're an intellectual and because you're a professor and this is what you do.
It was also 2 minutes out of a 2-day conversation.
Yes,
It's like, so it was something we just glanced over. Well, that was funny in some sense, because my sense is if you want to pillory someone, you should attribute to them views that someone somewhere has had. And the implication of that part of the New York Times article was that I wanted to, take nubile young women at the point of a gun under state enforcement and deliver them to useless men. It's like no one has ever believed that. So attributing
but it sounds like that. It's the optics of that statement are very bad. But the question is, why wasn't there follow-up questions? And if there was follow-up questions to get you to define what you mean by enforced monogamy.
Well, there were. They just didn't make it into the piece.
Well, that's a real problem.
Yeah, it's a real problem.
That's a real problem because
it's so ridiculous. Because
it's an inaccurate definition of who you are.
Well, one of the things I've said continually, and this is on record in multiple places, it's like, okay, so you're a young man, and all the women are rejecting you. Who's got the problem? It's not all the women. That's a bad road to go down. If all the women are rejecting you, it's you.
We both agree on this, but why is enforced monogamy the solution for people that are involuntary celibates?
Well, it's the solution to the relationship between men and women. Fundamentally, is monogamous social norms.
But these men are unattractive. If these men are unattractive,
solution to them.
But if these men are unattractive to women, I don't mean just physically unattractive. I mean women aren't seeking them as mates. They need to become men.
Yes, they certainly do.
That's
what
the
solution.
That's the solution.
Absolutely,
and we both agree on this. So,
yes, but they need to do that in a society where monogamy is the social norm.
But isn't it the social norm anyway?
Well, that was partly my point. Although, to the degree that we deviate from that, we tilt towards a more violent society. I was making a very minor point.
I don't think they're related, quite honestly. I don't think that involuntary celibates, I don't think that having enforced monogamy as a part of our cultural norm is going to help those people. I really don't.
It does.
How's it going to help them?
Well, because what happens is if a polygamous society develops, which is the alternative, then a small minority of men get all the women. That's what happens.
Oh, okay, I could see that.
That's the only point that I was making.
Theoretical world where polygamous societies exist en masse, and then you do have this problem where there's a small group of men that are fucking all the women. But that's not what we're talking about.
And also making the women unhappy, right? Because the women don't have any access to a genuine, intimate, one-to-one relationship over any long period of time.
Which
so
is what the women want. It's the whole idea is that the women want that. Right, sure, if you have children.
Right.
But I still don't think that is why these men are involuntary celibates, and I don't think it's the solution to that. I think the solution is that they need to become attractive to women.
Yes, that is the solution. Yes. There's no doubt about that.
I don't think the two are related.
Well, I was making a minor point. The minor point was that one of the ways that societies around the world have figured out that you keep young male aggression under control is by enforcing monogamous standards, because it gives everyone a chance in some sense. So that's the only point that I was making.
Meaning it clears more women will be available for one-on-one relationships rather than one guy who is some, whatever, for whatever reason, some large figure in society.
Yeah, well, you see this happening in universities where women outnumber men. So the men hypothetically have more sexual opportunity, but that isn't what happens. What happens is that a small minority of men have all the sexual opportunity. A fairly large minority of men don't. The women are unhappy because they can't find a committed relationship. It's bad for most of the men, and the men who have all the sexual opportunity get cynical.
But isn't this in some ways against your whole idea of equality of outcome, because you're talking about equality of sexual outcome now. If these men, if you have a guy like a LeBron James that's a dominant basketball player that just kicks everyone's ass, this is a guy who's succeeded at the highest level, right? Well, there's going to be people like that sexually. There's going to be people that are better at finding mates, and this is what they enjoy. They enjoy having many mates.
Yep,
they enjoy being, yes, but if this is what they enjoy, if it's a man who doesn't want a family and enjoys dating multiple women, why is that bad?
Well, I think the fundamental reason it's bad is because it's bad in the long run for children.
It's bad for children if he chooses to have children.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Sense.
But that's it. That's the fundamental issue as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And I think it's the answer. Look, to give the journalist credit, that is the point she was making. You know, apart from pillaring me and caricaturing my perspective, that was the point she was making. Well, first of all, I'm not in favor of unbridled hierarchies. Like I already said, that the proclivity of a hierarchy is that all the spoils go to the person at the top, and that can destabilize the whole structure.
Yes.
So we have to have a dialogue about how to rectify that.
But how could you possibly rectify that if one man is, like, say if we've got one 6'5" beautiful man who's got a perfect body and he's brilliant and he just wants to date a bunch of women, and all the rest of the people are 5'1" and they're fat and they're lazy, and like this guy's gonna. If this is the competition, he's going to win.
Yep.
There's no way around this. And even if you decide to have enforced monogamy, where it becomes a popular thing, the women are going to be more drawn to him. If he chooses to date them, they might decide, I would rather have him sometimes than never at all.
That is actually what does happen.
But what is wrong with that?
Well, what's wrong with it is that it destabilizes society and it's bad for children.
Right, you said that.
Yeah, but
what if they don't want to have children? But there's a lot of people that don't want to have children. There's a lot of people that choose to go their entire life without having children. There's men in their 30s. Some of my friends have vasectomies. They don't want children. So why would that help in any way, these involuntary celibates?
Well, I think you tilt the society so that it serves the interests of, well, that's a good question.
Do you see my point? Where
I do. Look, I see your point. There's no doubt about it.
You're almost forcing an inequality of outcome.
I know that was her point too. To the degree that she had a point, that was her point. Now, but it's not. It doesn't run contrary to my opinions that the issue of outcome has to be addressed. I already said there needs to be a reason for the left and the right, and that the problem with hierarchies is that they can get too steep and destabilize everything. That does happen. That particularly happens in the sexual domain. And there's plenty of anthropological evidence for that. But you still might say, well, who cares? Because the men who are winning should be allowed to win and the women should be allowed to choose. It's like, yes, except that there's the problem of children. And so society steps in on behalf of the children. And you can say, well, lots of people don't want to have children. And yes, and that's truer now than it used to be, although many of those people end up having children anyways, the guys who are sleeping around all the time, so that doesn't circumvent the problem. But the issue here for me isn't the men or the women, it's the children. We're trying to set up societies where the probability that children will be raised in something approximated an optimal environment is optimized. And that's going to mean sacrifice of opportunity and choice on the part of adults. It's necessary. I agree with you, but I think that what we're talking about mirrors what we're talking about in sports. It mirrors what we're talking about in business. It's everything else. There's going to be people that are better at all different aspects of life. There's going to be people that are talented in terms of like getting women to like them. Yes, that's true. Well, that's why also, look, you see this. Right. Women are hypergamous, which means they mate across and up dominance hierarchies. And so if you're a male who's successful in a given hierarchy, the probability that you're going to have additional mating opportunities is exceptionally high. It's an unbelievably good predictor of that.